Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. It is me, Dean, here, and we have a very interesting conversation that we're going to have this week. But I can't have a conversation alone. As always, I have Dev with me. Dev, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It was a very busy week or so for us. A lot of back end stuff for us in terms of decks and different videos we want to showcase for you guys, and a lot of research for today's topic. This is a very fundamental piece of the competitive trading card scene, but man, it becomes more and more complicated every year we talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know while we were researching this, I'm like, oh, this is not going to be that complicated. We kind of already have an idea what to talk about. But as we were looking into different pieces, I'm like, whoa, there's way more here than I anticipated. So, with that being said, Devin, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about the rotation for the upcoming 2026-2027 competitive period. We used to say was the beginning of a new season because rotation usually happened after Worlds, but we've changed that. We're rotating at the little beyond the halfway point of a season, and it changes how the last quarter, the last third of the year is going to be for us as competitive players.
Exactly. And I actually remember when that happened. Because yeah, again, it used to be like, okay, once Worlds hits, this is what's rotating, or even right before World, that this is what's rotating. And now it's kind of like not necessarily in the middle of the season, but kind of like between like half to like
It's like a 2/3 point.
75%
It's like a
way.
weird
Yeah.
because we're halfway through Q3, right? We're about to enter Q4 technically.
I think so. I'm not sure how they're doing the quarters anymore because I've seen different ways of the quarters. Um, but I know is we're done the first two internationals, the last international being NEIC in July, and we still got a decent amount of regionals left.
Hmm.
And even at the time of recording, we have about, I would say, like two or three of Ascended Hero um, regionals before we go into regionals that are rotation and beyond.
Yeah.
So with that, Dev, what is rotation? Like, am I just like moving my cards around on the board? Well, we say this term, but can you explain what this term means to our listeners that are maybe more newer to the game than other people?
Yeah, so rotation is a term, and it's a term that's not just Pokemon centric. Let's be very broad about what we're talking about. Rotation is a term for all competitive TCGs, or at least most competitive TCGs. Not every TCG uses a rotation, but Pokemon, Magic, um, and then
Fun
others.
fact, Yu-Gi-Oh does not.
Yeah,
I
Yu-Gi-Oh is
learned
the one
that
that does. That's
the
what I'm
other
saying.
day.
Not every game does, because Yu-Gi-Oh does not. If you want to play Dark Magician from 1998, you definitely can. But you can't play base set Charizard from 1998,
Yeah.
which is a really good compare and contrast. But what rotation is that there is going to be a group of cards that Pokemon says you can no longer play in the standard format. For this year, that group of cards is the Regulation Mark G cards. Now, Regulation Mark G are the sets Scarlet Violet Base, Paldea Evolved, 151, Obsidian Flames, Paradox Rift, and the reprint set of Paldean Fates. Those sets are Regulation Mark G. And those sets comprise of about 1,000 cards that are being removed from the card pool and that we will no longer be able to play with. Now, in terms of how rotation is scheduled, so rotation will go live on Pokemon Live Client on March 26th, and then in real life play, it will go effective April 10th. Those dates are the same legality dates as Perfect Order. So we're talking about 1,000 cards from the G block being removed and 88 new cards from Perfect Order, which is beginning the J block being added. So we're talking about a net loss of 900 cards that will affect deck building, and will affect decision making when it comes to cups, challenges, league play, regionals, and above for the remainder of the 2026 season.
Yeah, so the point of this episode is we want to just educate y'all on the different types of cards that we're losing and maybe offer some kind of like cards just for deck building purposes. So that way you're not completely out of the dark. Granted, it's not going to be a 1-to-1 match. There's no cards are never like that, but we can at least offer our suggestions based on the research from Japanese lists that we've been looking at, the Champions League, Fukuoka, just city leagues in Japan, and just like overall just game knowledge as well. And that way y'all can make the decision when you want to rebuild decks or make new decks from perfect order on, because it's going to be completely different. We are losing cards that we've been so used to the last 2 years, and we're like, okay, I want to put this in there. Like, oh wait, no, that doesn't exist anymore in this format. I need to do something different. And I know with the decks that we have planned already, we've kind of already started that process ourselves with planning for our videos for Perfect Order. And again, like it's something that Dev and I have been kind of already talking about internally, because like we want to play these great decks, and we have to get out of these mindset of like, okay, I can't put this card in here, I can't put this card. What can I do instead to make this deck work? So we're hopefully this video will help out with that conversation with us and with you all. But yeah, with that, I think a good way to start the conversation is talk about key archetypes in the format that we're currently in that will completely go away, because that does change viability. That does change. It changes a lot to our deck selection once Perfect Order does hit live and or IRL tournaments. So with that, the main decks we want to talk about are Charizard EX, the Terra, Gholdengo EX, Gardevoir EX, Miraidon EX, and then Chien-Pao EX and Ancient Box. So those are all, most of them, the first four are decks that we're currently seeing right now. The last two, they were just big playmakers back either a year or even not even that long ago, to be honest. Just they were kind of pushed out, but they're still there. They're still powerful. And with that being said, we are doing a series leaning into rotation, and we're featuring some of these decks that we believe can still make a mark in this current format while we still have them. So go ahead, check out those videos when they release. We have 4 decks that we picked out, and I think you'll like the last video as we kind of also introduce post rotation as well. So with that, all that being said, Dev, out of really Charizard, Gholdengo, Gardevoir, and Miraidon, what are your thoughts about us losing those decks? How impactful it is going from Perfect Order on? Give us your initial like feeling, thoughts about really these major decks we're losing.
To me, first and foremost, we are losing 3 of the biggest gatekeepers in the format. Gardevoir, Gholdengo, and Terra Charizard EX gatekeep a lot of creative ideas from even being seen at the Challenge and Cup level, let alone at the regional and higher level. Gardevoir, Gardevoir was so powerful in terms of acceleration and just raw strength. You weren't considering fighting because of Gardevoir. You weren't considering lower HB decks because of Gholdengo, because Gholdengo basically has an unlimited damage cap. You weren't going to be able to slow play Gholdengo because they just outpace you. And then Charizard EX has been able to redefine itself for 2 years with so many different partners and strategies that you couldn't really play it. Like, you can't play lower HP decks because you just got hit by Dust Noir. You can't try to outpace Charizard because if you take too many prizes, they just punish you. And you can't be weak to Dark because this Charizard uses Fire Energy as a Darkness Pokemon. So we're losing a lot of really strong gatekeepers, which to me is a brilliant thing because that's the greatest part of rotation every year. We lose a lot of top-tier decks, which allows a lot of new ideas to reemerge and to be more viable. Now, at the regional and higher level, we're and we'll talk about this toward the end of today's discussion, there's going to be decks that get stronger because they don't lose anything. Addition by
Hmm.
subtraction, right? But there's also going to be decks that just get stronger because Perfect Order makes them stronger, and then they have a better matchup. So there's still going to be some problems with the format. And I don't want to say what the problems are yet because I want to talk about what rotation does to the format first. But right now, we lose a lot of strong gatekeepers, which allows more ideas to flow. And between now, all through this perfect order portion of the rotation, and right before and up, even including the beginning of Chaos Rising, which will be our set in the early part of summer, deck building and deck analysis is going to be the number one thing that we need to be looking at because we just can't go online and find what's doing well. We're doing all our data based on Japanese results. You and I both know that only leads us so far in terms of what's actually going to be a good deck in terms of the tournaments we go to week in and week out.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I agree with you. With Charizard, Godango, and Garvar, those are the big gatekeepers. And with those leaving, it opens up more variety, and at least in the lower level where cups and challenges are, that we may or may not see in the regional level, but it's too early to tell just because we don't have any data on that. Um, for me, I think losing Miraidon, one, it's been around for a while, and two, I think Miraidon is the number one aggro deck in this format. You can go second and take two prizes so easily with Miraidon, and losing a such aggressive deck where I'm not even sure if there's a equivalent deck with post rotation on that can put you in such a aggressive situation, also a advantageous situation so early on in the game, where some people are just so used to that game style, they may need to move and try something else that they're not comfortable with, and that may take some practice, some getting used to. Because like for me, that's where I fall in. I usually play these more aggressive decks, and with Miraidon being the main one that we're losing, it's forcing me to kind of choose something that's a little more slower and more consistent versus like, okay, let me get two prizes and put pressure on you. So I think that's another thing that we're losing with this rotation is a deck like that where, to my knowledge, I can't think of a deck that can replace Miraidon in that capacity.
No, absolutely. So, and again, that's the purpose of rotation, right? They want to challenge us as players to try something different. That way, we're not playing the same deck year over year, format over format. And the rotation will force us to look at cards differently for sure. But with that
Mm-hmm.
being said, we're going to go into cards that are beyond these archetypes. So now we're going to talk about tech Pokemon or just engines that we're losing. And then we're going to talk about the trainer cards because rotation for Pokemon is very straightforward. We're just losing them. You just have to find a different style, find a different archetype, and just kind of move on. When it comes to trainers, they're the lifeblood of a deck. They're the skeleton of a deck. So we can't just be like, oh, we're losing a card. Let's just move on. No, we're losing a card. We have to find its most close replacement or spiritual successor in order to keep what we want for a deck generally. Because whenever you're deck building, you're looking toward your trainer skeleton first and then kind of plugging the Pokemon around it. So this conversation is going to be very trainer focused, as it should be, because rotation impacts the trainer part of deck building probably more significantly than any other part of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Pokemon, that's like you said, that's more black and white. If we lose it, we lose it. If we keep it, we keep it. That's fine. But yeah, the trainers, without the trainers, the decks don't work, and it's on us as the pilots, as the creators, to figure out what can make a certain archetype work and what doesn't. So we talked about the main archetypes that left the or will be leaving the format, but there's also a lot of good support Pokemon that will be leaving as well that will put us in the similar situation. We need to figure out what what support Pokemon can we put in decks that will make whatever perfect order on work. So let's go back and talk about what are the ones that we've seen the most often in this format that we're not going to have the option to use anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So on our list that we created, we have Pidgeot EX,
Yep.
so no more quick search. Squawkability EX, no more dump your hand and draw 5 or draw 6 cards. For the poison deck lovers out there, no more Brute Bonnet with the ability. We lose Mew EX, so no more draw and pivot option. No Cleffa, no Mimikyu, no Klefki, no more Iron Hands EX, no more Baxcalibur, no more Iron Bundle, no more Armarouge with the Fire Off ability, and no more of the Toll Scroll, both the Slime Mold Colony and the Protective Mycelium abilities, the EX version.
Yep.
So those are the ones that we're leaving. So Dev, why is this impactful for us?
So each one of these cards we just talked about and kind of listed, they accelerate, or they're the backbone of engines or archetypes that can be kind of toolboxy, right? So we've seen Pidgeot EX in every single deck that really wants to rely on stage 2s. We've seen Squawkability EX in every single aggro deck that really wants to pop off turn 1. Like you mentioned, Brute Bonnet has been the cornerstone of a poison package for 2 years now. Mew EX has been a free retreater and a draw, so you can play your hand size down and draw 1 to 3 cards, which is invaluable in a lot of decks. Cleffa has been a really good baby Pokemon. I would say if Voodoo didn't exist, Cleffa would be the best baby. Klefki and Mimikyu more of a stall wall package where you're either item locking or you're ability locking or you're preventing damage, but with the idea of stalling and walling. Iron Hand EX is really the weirdest one in this list because it really doesn't do anything other than cheap prizes, and it works in basically the electric box kind of format. We've seen it in Miraidon box, we've seen it in Joltik box, but it's been a cornerstone of cheating prizes. So Amp You Very Much is not just the the piece of a puzzle, it is the puzzle for a lot of the electric archetype. Baxcalibur with its Rain Dance, let's just be honest what it is. Water slows down with Baxcalibur leaving. Iron Bundle has been ability-based gusting, which was very, very strong maybe about 6 to 8 months ago. It slowed down a bit, but it was super important in the beginning of last rotation. Armarouge, again, was this cornerstone of a boxed variant. We're not going to see really a boxy deck for a little while. I know Terra Box is still a thing, but Terra Box and Armarouge Box really did not do the same thing. And then Toadscrew EX was the protection that Grass wanted for the longest time. So as you see with these cards, they fulfilled very important roles and kind of expanded the meta field for a lot of players. And now, again, we're losing those cards along with 800 plus others. So with that, we have to be creative in terms of how we do Pokemon-based strategies. Just different archetypes, different things. Like with all these cards leaving, allows more cards to become MVPs, allows more cards to become important. But we have to reevaluate the card pool now because we don't get what we're used to anymore.
So with that, let's reevaluate the card pool. Let's go through the trainer cards, talk about what we're losing, and maybe quickly talk about some options that we have that will kind of more or less fill that role, but not 100%. So we have different categories of the trainer cards that we have. So, Dev, you want to start off with the draw cards that we're losing. And honestly, this is probably the biggest category that is, or the most impactful category in my opinion.
No, absolutely. And the list for the losing is smaller than you think it is. And what we're keeping is larger than you think it is. But because of the type of cards we're losing, it's going to be very different in terms of how you build your decks. So the 2 cards that we're losing that are your main draw supporters are Professor Research, which is discard your hand, draw 7, and Iono, which is shuffle your hand to the bottom of your deck and then draw equals the number of prizes. And I consider Iono a draw card just as much as I consider Iono a disruption card, because sometimes you Iono early, Iono yourself the 6 cards. You
Hmm.
probably do that as often, if not more often, than you Iono late game to disrupt your opponent's hand. So Iono is a draw card in my book, because it can be a really decent early game draw. But the fact we're losing Professor's research is massive. Discard your hand and draw 7 has been a backbone in deck building for majority of Pokemon since the competitive scene really has become more popular. There has been seasons that we do not have discard draw 7, but I will be very surprised to see if we go the entire year without a Professor's research of some form coming back before the World Championships in 2027.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see that rotating because I'm just so used to a professor's research or Professor Sycamore, Juniper, something like that, because that's always been around. But now we're going to a format where no, we don't have a discard draw 7. You can't just refresh your hand and like play the game like with a whole fresh hand anymore. But with that being said, like we do have similar cards for it. With one being the most important one, which we still have now, is Lily's Determination,
Mhm.
where you can shuffle your hand into your deck, draw 6, but if you have 6 prizes left, you can draw 8. So again, similar to research, you're not discarding hand. So important resources you have in your hand, you can still keep, and hopefully you don't draw into them with the effect of the card. But it's still a decent hand size. Another card that we have that fulfills a similar role is Maury's Conviction. We also have Carmine, which is probably the most similar to Professor's Research, to where we do discard, but we draw 5 instead of 7. And then we have the new Naveen card that's coming out in perfect order, which reads, you may discard any number of cards from your hand, then draw until you have 5 cards in your hand, and if you can't discard, you can't play the card. So more of situational, thoughtful discard, so you can draw until you have 5.
Mhm.
And then if you're looking for maybe more of a Pokemon role, we do have Mega Kangaskhan with the Run Aaron's ability. But again, it's not a one-to-one to with Professor's Research or Iono. They're again similar, but not 100% the same. So it is a different way of building, different way of interacting with our deck, discard pile, and our hand. And it's just something that we have to get used to.
No, absolutely. And the Mega Kangaskhan piece is very much a. You have to be cautious with that because Team Rocket's Watchtower is going to be played in a lot more decks because normal type Pokemon are going to be targeted. And we'll talk about that really the biggest reason. We talked about that. Actually, let's talk about the elephant room. Meowth EX is going to be played. Meowth EX will impact a lot of these different types of categories we're talking about because deck building is going to be changing, not because of what we're losing, but because of the flexibility that card gives us. So you
Mm-hmm.
can play less draw supporters because you can play more setup based cards. You can play less. You can play a thinner line of gusting because you know you can cherry pick your gust later in the game. So Meowth EX is going to change a lot of these categories, not because of what Meowth EX does itself, because what Meowth EX gives you the capability of having access to. With that being said, Team Rocket's Watchtower is a perfect one-for-one counter for Meowth EX because it does shut down its ability, which makes Mega Kangaskhan a casualty to the playstyle because it can get shut down the same way. So we have to be very cognizant of what is going to be happening around us, and that kind of example of Meowth EX will allow us to play less draw support because we can grab more Serranos, we can grab more Larry's Skill, we can grab all these cards we're going to talk about later, but at what cost? Because a lot we talked about it in the episode with the Pokemon in Perfect Order review. There's certain things that people are going to make assumptions of when it comes to deck building. I We had the conversation about item block. Item block is a thing, but it's not as prevalent as you think it is. Meowth EX is going to be a thing. How prevalent do you think Watchtower is going to be? That's the interaction that you're going to have to be thinking about before we really get into some of these deck building kind of conversations. Because if you want to make Mega Kangaskhan part of your draw strategy, how prevalent are you? Do you think you're going to want into Watchtower because of the impact of Meowth EX?
Exactly. So we'll see. Again, it's a risk reward like there's going to be so much practice, so much assumptions that we're going to be making because we really don't know what our format's going to be. And then as we talked about Iono, that is a pretty big hand disruption card that we're missing, and honestly, it's the only hand disruption card we're missing. But with that being said, does it have a similar replacement to where it's gonna? Do we have something that fill that void? Dev, can you think of any cards to fill the void of the hand disruption that Iono brought to this format?
So Iono, a late game Iono is backbreaking. Let's just throw that out there, right? Now, in terms of what we're going to be able to keep and gain with the new sets and with rotation, there's 4 cards that I would say fill the role that you could have for Iono. But again, at the same time, they don't do what Iono did perfectly. First off is Judge. Shuffle your hand, draw 4 for both players. It's not as backbreaking as dropping your opponent's hand size down to 2 or 1, but it is still a disruption because a lot of the times you're doing the Iono because your opponent was just cherry picked something out of their deck. Shuffling that back into the deck is still just as good if it's at 4 or 2. Harlequin and Lucian fulfill similar roles, but again, they're more RNG based. They're both coin flip based. They are shuffle your hand into either the deck or the bottom of the deck, depending on which version you're doing. Flipping a coin, if it's heads, you get a variable outcome. If it's tails, you get an unfavorable outcome. So that is still disruption, but it isn't. There still could be a point where you could be rewarding your opponent just on a 50-50 coin flip. And then the last card is probably the closest Iono we can get, but again, it's conditional, where it's unfair stamp. It's 1 is your ace spec of the game. 2, you have to wait for your opponent for you to get knocked out. And then you can put your opponent's hand size down to 2 and you gain 5. So none of those do what Iono did. All of them do what Iono could do and philosophically fulfill the role of Iono, but has different drawbacks. And none of them can put your opponent down to 1. You can Iono your opponent down to 1 and then you can come back. None of these can do that. But a lot of these can still slow your opponent down.
Yeah, I remember when we saw the Fukuoka Champions League, and we saw how many decks play Unfair Stamp, people were like, whoa, why are they playing Unfair Stamp? And then we realized, oh, it's our Iono replacement. Hand disruption was so needed that this is the only card that can do that and slow down the game so much that most of the top decks play it. I will say, since then, I'm looking at Japanese lists, and a lot of people are moving away from the Unfair Stamp, just because, 1, trying to find new things, but 2, seeing that it's not really like fully necessary, but at the same time, like going down to 2 is still very bad, depending where you're at in game and what you draw from that. But yeah, the hand disruption, man, losing Iono, and really those are the only pieces we have. It's going to be a fun way to interact. Like, okay, what do I need? How do I play around Unfair Stamp if I do choose to play around that? And do I make that my ace spec of choice going forward until we have other options? So, interesting thought process right there. So with that being said, I think we can go into our next topic here, which is energy recovery.
Oh, yeah.
So, Dev, what are we losing for energy-wise?
So in terms of energy recovery, there's some pieces that we have to understand when it comes to energy recovery. We are not talking about decks that want to have certain resources in the discard pile. So we're not talking about decks that are pieces that will hamper a Dynamotor strategy or anything like that. We're talking about resources that decks wanted to have a large hand size or large resource size. These are the strategies that those decks are losing. So we're losing superior energy retrieval. We're losing the capability of putting 4 energy into your hand. We're losing EXP share, keeping the energy on board. We're losing Super Rod, being able to put energy and basic energy and or Pokemon into your deck. And Super Rod's going to be brought up again in a minute because, again, it's not just energy recovery, it's also Pokemon recovery. So we're losing those big three pieces. And the first two, Superior Energy Retrieval and EXP share more niche strategies. Only certain decks really utilize that. But almost every single deck played Super Rod. So the fact that we're losing Super Rod is very important. And that also shows how weak energy recovery has been in the format, but it also shows what the list that Dean's about to talk about, how diverse this type of card can be, and how maybe we're not losing as much as we think we are.
Yeah. So when we were going through this, I'm like, oh man, we're losing a lot of energy recovery cards. But when we did a research, I'm like, wait, we're not in a bad position here. We're keeping regular energy retrieval, so we can still get the two cards, and we don't have to discard cards for that. We're keeping energy recycler, so that can have up to 5 basic energy cards go into our deck, which is going to be very impactful for a lot of the decks coming out of going into perfect order. We're keeping Night Stretcher, and that's Pokemon and energy into our hand. Glass Trumpet, which Pokemon wants us to play more into this Terra type archetype anyway. So this is just a perfect way for us to really take advantage of what Pokemon wants us to do. And when it comes to supporters, we have Lana's Aid, which is a perfect way to get our energy or even just non-rule box Pokemon into our hand. And then if you're playing stage twos, we have Rose's Encouragement coming out with Perfect Order, where we can power up our stage two Pokemon straight from the discard pile straight onto the board versus even playing around with putting it in our deck or in our hand. It just cuts through it all and is like, okay, let's just put it on the Pokemon and then we can start swinging. So we have options in terms of energy recovering, and honestly, none of these are bad options. They're actually pretty good. Um, Obviously, depending on how you build around it, but honestly, these aren't. I will say these are actually really good solutions to what we're losing.
I would say Rose's Encouragement is probably one of the few supporters that I would say is a like for like replacement of a item, because Super Rod and EXP Share were cards that kind of pseudo recovered. They had very situational niches. I think Rose's Encouragement is the best recovery acceleration we can have, and for you not to lose tempo at the same time. Because normally you don't want to use a supporter to do what a trainer card or item card did, because you lose tempo on the turn. I think Rose's Encouragement keeps the tempo up and does what you were wanting to do from the replacement that it was doing in terms of this EXP Share Super Rod combo. So I think we talked about it in the set review. We think Rose's Encouragement is a really good card. And I think we're going to see more of it, especially because TCPI wants us to play Stage 2 decks. That's the whole point of this kind of generation of cards we're in. And they just built a card saying play Stage 2 even more. So do not be
Mm-hmm.
surprised that you see this card a lot, especially with the fact that Stage 2s are going to be more prevalent than ever.
Exactly. And I think you can make a similar argument with Glass Trumpet. TPCI wants us to play these Terra archetypes, and with Mega Kingscom being more prevalent out there, and if you're playing Terra, you're most likely playing Noctowl. Glass Trumpet is just an easy card to fit in there. Energy acceleration, and then you can do whatever you need to do because you also play Energy Switch. We still kept that card. So those are two, I would say, pieces of what TPCI is moving us towards that we still keep. It's just getting used to playing a style like that. That may be something a trainer will probably need to practice with.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that, speaking of actually trainers, um, we're losing a pretty big trainer search card, Dev.
Mm-hmm.
What card is that?
We're,
And also we already know what the answer is because everyone's probably yelling at us right now while listening to this that we haven't even brought this up sooner. But what is the big trainer search card that is going to be missed as we go forward in post rotation?
we're losing Arvin, which I think out of all the cards that we're losing, it is the second most impactful card. I think Professor's Research is always a problem when you lose it because I've been around rotations where you lose that discard draw 7. I think outside of that, Arvin and the flexibility Arvin gives you turn over turn, beginning, early, and late game, is not replaceable. And the fact that we're losing that now is such a big deal because not only did it get you item cards, it also got you tool cards. So you're thinning out 2 cards
Hmm.
from your deck every single time you play it, and it was able to, again, talked about tempo. It was a good tempo card, and we're losing that. So in terms of replacements, I don't know if any of the cards we have on our list is as good tempo wise as Arvin is, but we still have cards that do very similar effects that we can plug into our deck for certain types of search when it comes to these trainer search abilities.
Exactly. I know the big one that a lot of people started playing really almost four ofs in all their decks just to replace this Arvin was Team Rocket's Petrol, where it just says you can grab a trainer card. And with that, they're also playing more Team Rocket's trans receiver so they can get the Petrol and then grab whatever trainer card they need. But at the same time, it's only half of what Arvin was doing.
It's half of what Arvin
We
was
also have
doing, but it allows you to search for stadiums.
that is true. Yeah, we can get stadiums. So there's, I would say that is the probably an important piece that Petrol had over Arvin. But a lot of times, a lot of these decks were playing a lot of tools. So you were looking for your air balloon, you're looking for TM evolution, you're looking for other important pieces. Grab two at once. You're thinning. You're grabbing what you need to keep up your tempo. Petrol is only doing half of that. Granted, it can give you some other pieces to kind of help with the tempo, but again, this is probably the one category that this isn't something something like that is a exact fix. We're going to be losing something here, and that's just something we'll have to get used to going forward as we find other consistency pieces to kind of make up for the loss of Arvin. I would say another card that we're gaining from this that kind of similar, and I actually didn't think about this until I did a little more research was Larry's skill actually.
Mm-hmm.
You discard your hand and you look for a Pokemon, supporter card, and basic energy card. So we're grabbing something really for the next turn here because we're not grabbing item cards here, but you can grab a Pokemon to set up your board, and you can grab an energy to put on your Pokemon, and then you can get a card for next turn. So you can get a Lilies for next turn, you can get a Boss for next turn. But again, it's not the consistency there, the tempo there. It's still putting you behind the eight ball a little bit, but it's still an option. I wouldn't say it's the best option, but based on the research, like this is what we have for now. Granted, as we move forward, Pokemon may not build cards that will fulfill a similar role that Arvin had, and that's something that we just have to be mindful of as we move into this rotation and just going forward with this game in the future.
No, absolutely. And then another card that I think we'll see a little more play. Again, we're talking about the role of Apex a lot today. Is I think Secret Box may see more uses because yes, it is discard 3, but you're getting so many different types of trainers with Secret Box. So I think the Secret Box play in terms of how often you'll see a Secret Box will be directly impacted to how impactful that unfair stamp is in your deck. Because until unfair stamp is proven to be the not the best idea for your deck, most people are probably going to plug in unfair stamp and then figure out if it's good, if it's has the highest value for your ace back of choice. So that's another way you
Mm-hmm.
could be looking for your trainers, but it's a discard 3 and then you get the cards versus Arvin, which is a free. So we'll
Yeah.
see what happens with that. Your ace spec choice now, if we haven't already kind of shown what that impact is, probably matters more than ever because ace specs are rotating in 2027. Terra Pokemon are rotating in 2027. So this is going to be the last hurrah for these types of cards. So we need to make sure that we're putting the most amount of impact in when we build our decks with these type of cards.
Exactly. So speaking of putting Pokemon in play, we're also losing scoop up effects. So, Dev, what are the main scooping up cards that we're losing? And honestly, is there a way to work around this?
So, scoop up effects for the last year or so have not really been the most prominent game mechanic. Um, so we're losing Penny and we're losing Professor Turo Scenario, which are very niche cards. I think Professor Turo saw more play than Penny did, but it really wasn't in a lot of deck archetypes. Um, and what we're keeping doesn't really make this mechanic any better. I don't think it makes it any worse because we're keeping Scoop Up Cyclone, again, another A spec that you have to evaluate whether or not you want to use it in your deck. And then the
Hmm.
only other thing that's really close to this is a bench manipulation strategy with area zero under depths and either counter stadium your stadium the turn after, or doing like a baby Chien Pao play where you're automatically getting rid of your stadium to shrink. Um, so any attack that discards stadium after you want to go wide is really the only other way to really take advantage of this scoop up removal without sacrificing a prize kind of mechanic. I would say out of all the different categories we're talking today, this is by far the weakest mechanic, and it's because there really isn't much that's being lost and not much really gaining or keeping in the format because it's a mechanic that not any really only a few decks used week over week.
I think with this category though, it showcases that the support Pokemon that we put in play are going to be kept in play unless we utilize these really two options. So an early game Meowth, an early game Fez, an early game whatever support Mon that doesn't really you can't attack with. That's going to be on your bench the whole entire time, and it's really going to be a provide two prizes to your opponent if they can get a boss out or whatever they can do to get those easy prizes. So I think as we play this game, when we bench Pokemon at a certain time, really needs to be a calculated risk. Like, do I really need this Meowth when I know unless I attack with this with 3 energy and I'm only doing 60 damage, can I get this out of play? Uh, Starting with a Fez, am I going to be kind of putting myself on the back foot the whole entire game? Because we know that support Pokemon are important in decks, but what about when we need to have those liabilities in play the whole entire game?
Mm-hmm.
So is that calculated risk that we really need to think about going forward because we don't have a good option to get those out of play anymore?
Now, and with that being said, though, please do not misconstrue what we just said as do not play your tech slash support Pokemon on the bench ever. Meowth is very important. Pheasantipity, very important. Your tech kind of support mons for your deck archetypes. We're talking about like the Flying Entry Huluchas, your Badoos, like those Pokemon have certain roles for the archetype that you're operating within. If you need a turn one Meowth to get the supporter so you can actually play the game, turn one Meowth. Don't worry about the two prizes you're giving up. If you need to put the Pheasantipity after getting KOs, that way you can draw 3 more prizes to try to recover your board state, play the Pheasantipity. This is not saying do not play support bonds because they are 2 prize liabilities. They're not liabilities if they help you play the game. So please understand when we're talking about this mechanic, we're not trying to scare anyone away from playing these cards because they're in your deck for a reason. But
Yeah,
understand
and that
there is that risk reward of playing those cards.
Yeah, and that's why I use the term calculated risk. Like, don't just play Pheasant Dippy on board just because you had it in hand and like, okay, I'm gonna just put it on board without any reason, and especially like, okay, I know my opponent has boss in hand, they can easily knock that out. Let's just play it, even though I didn't get knocked out this turn, just let it be there. But sometimes you have to, so you can either stay in the game because like, okay, I know they're gonna knock me out. I just need to survive one more turn. Okay, Fez. If they knock out the Fez, I still have another Pokemon. I can still get my pieces going. Or as you said, like sometimes we have bricky hands. You need to play that Meowth to get that Lilies. You need to play that Meowth to get whatever support you need to make your deck work. It's a calculated risk. We're not saying like don't ever do this, but that's part of playing this game. It's part of deck building. We do make calculated risks with every decision we do. And you just need to be mindful of what that is against your opponent and for yourself.
Yep, absolutely. So speaking of which, in terms of finding those type of cards, the next category we want to talk about actually is Pokemon search. So every year, Pokemon search loses something. Something gets rotated out that will affect how we search our Pokemon from the item-based side. This year, we're losing really one major card and then one kind of tech card. So we're losing Nest
Mm-hmm.
Ball and we're losing Techno Radar. Techno Radar was for Future Paradox Pokemon, was used in a couple of Future Paradox decks. But the big piece here is we're losing Nest Ball. And Nest Ball was such a big card when it got reprinted. Now that we're losing it 2 years later, how do we replace Nest Ball in the deck in terms of what we want to accomplish with it?
Well, we actually have a lot of good options that we're keeping that will kind of like not necessarily serve the same function of Nest Ball, but a lot of times it may actually be better or worse depending on the type of deck you're playing. So first of all, we're keeping Ultra Ball. We have at least a stable, consistent ball search that we have in our deck, and most decks will probably play 3 to 4 of these. Next, we have Pokepads. So if you're playing a deck that have a lot of non-Roblox Pokemon, Pokepads are your cards to go to. They are being reprinted in Perfect Order. We covered that in our Perfect Order review video. So hopefully the price will drop by then. Another card that a lot of people are playing right now is Buddy Buddy Poffin. So if you're playing a lot of setup decks, you're already playing 4 of Buddy Buddy Poffin. Just continue playing those 4 ofs. Don't worry about the Nest Ball. Some new inclusions that we may or may not have right now, or we have, but we may or may not be adding to our decks. We have Terra Orb. So if you're playing more of a Terra style deck, you can play Terra Orb to grab that Pokemon instead of Nest Ball. A good example of that will be like the EVEX, that's Terra Pokemon. So we also have Team Rocket's Great Ball. The Team Rocket archetype is actually really strong going into Perfect Order and rotation. So this is another great way to grab your Team Rocket's Pokemon as well. And a good ace spec will be Precious Trolley. Mm-hmm. You can play Precious Trolley, grab that with using Team Rocket's Petrol, get it, and then your board is set up. You don't really need any other Pokemon search if you get Precious Trolley out early on in the game. So those are the big cards that we can utilize. More deck-specific cards that we have are Bug Catching Set. You can also get Grass Energy with that card as well. And Fighting Gong, same thing. You can either get your Fighting Pokemon or Fighting Energy. And then maybe a couple support options. Granted, it is your supporter for turn. But if you're playing an EX heavy deck, you have Serrano. And then Brock Scouting is, I'm actually seeing a lot of play with that because you either can get 2 basic Pokemon or 1 evolution. And the basic Pokemon are not limited to EX or non-Roblox Pokemon. So we have a decent amount of options. Yes, we're losing a big consistency card in Nest Ball, but this is probably one of the categories where I think we're going to be fine moving forward.
Nest Ball was always one of those weird cards because unless you wanted that Pokemon onto your bench, sometimes you weren't even playing it because even if you had an open bench slot, you'd rather use it to put the card in your hand because it was a hand to play ability. Or it just was something you didn't want on your bench in certain circumstances. So Nest Ball is a big loss, but I don't think it was as big as everyone's making it out to be. But because it's the only real loss of this category, we had to talk about it. And showcasing how many other options there are in the format, I'm more worried about Rotation 27 in this category than I am Rotation 26.
Yeah, a lot of the cards we just mentioned, we're losing in 27. So we got a year to worry about that. But again, this after doing a lot more research, because everyone was freaking out, it's like, oh man, we're losing Nest Ball, we're losing our ball search, we're losing our Pokemon search, and it's like, yeah, we're losing the card, but honestly, a good deck builder can use these options and be perfectly fine. But I will say the next category may be a little bit more difficult to really bounce back from. Granted, not impossible, and there are options. But when it comes to Pokemon recovery, because we are losing Super Rod, there's no easy way to get Pokemon from the discard pile back into our deck anymore. But again, I think we're going to be fine. What cards with losing Super Rod? What cards can we maybe think about adding to our deck that can serve a similar function?
So first and foremost, Super Rod doesn't only just do Pokemon recovery. Obviously, it is energy recovery, but what it also is an anti-deck out card. It puts Pokemon or puts cards back into your deck so you have more turns to play. Now, in terms of the recovery aspect of this card, we still have Night Stretcher, which allows us to get one Pokemon or one energy into our hand, which still can allow us to kind of, again, keep that tempo. Sacred Ash allows us to put 5 Pokemon into the deck. So that is kind of like it, but it's Pokemon, not energy flex. So it's very specific in terms of deck archetype. We have Max Rod, but Max Rod puts the cards into our hand. We have Tarragon coming in, but Tarragon's only a fighting recovery card, and it's a supporter, not an item. And we have Lana's Aid, which is a card that some decks still utilize, but again, it puts into hand, and it's your supporter for a turn. So there are some cards that can do what Super Rod does, but not. There is no one card that does everything Super Rod does. Either you want to recover the Pokemon into your hand, recover it into your deck, but you won't be able to kind of do both Pokemon and energy. You're gonna instead of one card, you're gonna have to do a 2-card combo. So it's one of those things that I think Super Rod is probably the most valuable card that we're losing that no one's talking about. And it's because everyone's been taking advantage of Super Rod for so long. I don't know and remember a format Super Rod's not been legal. It's been that long. So just keep in mind that Night Stretcher is really good. Night Stretcher is probably going to become more of a 3 to 4 of in most decks now. But it doesn't do what Super Rod did, which would be extend the games in some matchups.
It's the flexibility that Super Rod offers, and I think that's something that a lot of people forget. It's like, yeah, you get your Pokemon, but you can also get energy, or you can get both. Like it provided a lot of flexibility, but now we have to either pick: do we want to get our energy back, or do we want to get our Pokemon back? We can't do both because we had Super Rod, and before that we had Ordinary Rod, or then we had Clara. But now we actually have to use 2 cards to do what Super Rod did. So with having that, that's adding more cards to our deck that we need to use versus having one that's like a catch-all for a certain situation. And honestly, with that, it kind of goes along the same thought process as Energy Search. Because we're losing Earthen Vessel. We've been so used to having Earthen Vessel in our decks. It's a great way to get our energy out. But now we have to think of another way to get our energy into our hand. Yes. So, Dev, what cards can we use since we can't use Earthen Vessel anymore?
So keep in mind, Earthen Vessel was a search for 2 energy, put it in your hand. 2 basic energy, put it in your hand. So we're losing a searchable 2 energy. So 2 cards out of deck, 2 energies into your hand kind of card. So we still have Energy Search, which is 1 basic energy into your hands, which sometimes is enough. We still have Bug Catching Set for the grass energies. We still have Fighting Gong for the fighting energies. But outside of that, we either have to use Ace Spec for Energy Search Pro, which honestly I don't know of an archetype that really wants to use that because it was really made for Golden Go. No other deck really wants to use it more than 2 energy types anyway. And then we have Crispin. Yeah. Crispin is still your supporter for turn. Yes, it does accelerate 2 energy, but it's your supporter for turn. But I still think doing a Crispin play when you're losing an Earthen Vessel is still not a bad play. I think that's your closest card that keeps the tempo that Earthen Vessel did for you than anything else we're talking about. And I think making it the supporter for turn still doesn't feel as bad as other alternatives we've talked about today. So we don't have much for Energy Search. Mostly Energy Acceleration will take over for this kind of type of card. But there's certain archetypes that will be able to recover from it better than others. We're talking the grass and fighting.
Exactly. And also we have psychic because we have wondrous patch, but you need to have the energy in your discard.
Mhm.
So there's ways around gaining energy into your hand, which goes in your play. But again, energy surge was so good. Also, the one piece that we forgot to talk about, you had to discard a card to use Earthen Vessel. That was a way for you to utilize your discard pile in another way as well. That's why we saw it pair really well with the ancient decks because then you can use Professor Saw's Vitality, which is another card we're losing. Um, we also see it in just like a lot of decks that utilize discard just as another area of resources. And with losing that, we lose a way to kind of gain resources in the discard.
Yep.
So again, it's another versatile card. Granted, the main part of it was gaining the energy from the deck, but there was that little piece as well. And we don't really. I think like you're right. The Crispin's probably our best option, and not a bad option either. It still keeps with our tempo of the game, but everything else, it's like, ooh, this is not necessarily good unless I'm playing a grass deck or unless I'm playing a fighting deck. If I'm playing a water deck, what do I have? And I think that's just deck building right there. We need to utilize how we see cards in the best way to really play the Pokemon strength and use the trainers to really support that strength of that Pokemon card.
Yep. Absolutely. So we talked about the search, we talked about recovery. So the next category of cards I really want to talk about is the cards that I think everyone kind of forgets about it because we've been talking about basic energy, basic Pokemon. We've been talking about really the meat and potatoes. But these special energy cards, we're losing some doozies. But I
Mm-hmm.
think with this next, like this J block, we're going to be seeing an increase in special energies in this J block. So I think the special energy category is going to be fine. But we're still losing luminous energy, jet energy, and reversal energy. And with that being what we're losing, it's going to be interesting on how some of these type of archetypes and type of cards get played because luminous energy just gave us a lot of flexibility in terms of energy typing and energy kind of deck building, right? Because luminous, you can play luminous and be able to turn on Monkey Dory. You can play luminous and Dragapult gets to have some fun, right? Jet energy helps you get a heavy retreat cost Pokemon out of the active and just put in a colorless attacker out of nowhere. And then the reversal energy really was able to give you kind of some late to mid game kind of flexibility and that little pop out of nowhere. But with what we're losing, I think what we're gaining makes this category much stronger, and it's one of the few areas of the game that's better with rotation, partially because of what Perfect Order brings us.
Exactly. So we still keep Prism Energy. So if you're playing basic Pokemon, Prism Energy is perfect, and you can actually have multiple Prism Energy on a basic Pokemon versus Luminous. You can't have multiple special energy. We still keep Legacy Energy. Yes, it's your ace spec of choice, but honestly, offsetting that price trade is honestly a really good thing to do. We still have Ignition, so you don't need to be behind in prizes for reversal, but it needs to be on evolution, but it doesn't have to be a non-rule box. So there's a lot of pros that we're getting with Ignition versus the reversal energy. We still have Miss, so we can still turn off damage counters from Phantom Dive. We still have Neo Upper. We have the Team Rocket energy, so if you're playing Team Rocket's decks, Team Rocket energy is still there. And then with Perfect Order, we're getting Grow energy, we're getting Telepathic, Psychic energy, and we're getting Rock Fighting, which all have really good purposes for those typings.
Mhm.
And I forgot about Enriching energy, another ace spec that we're getting. So Alexam players, the Dunsparce players, you still have your Enriching energy to help draw more cards and really churn through your deck. So, yes, we're losing a couple big pieces with special energies, but we're gaining a lot of big pieces too. I think this is the more of like the 50-50 category where like yeah, we're losing something, but what we're gaining kind of matches what we're losing.
Rotation 28 is going to be brutal for this category. Because rotation 28, we're going to lose all these type specific special energies that we're now just being introduced to. So this is going to be a category that players are going to be they're just going to take advantage of because they're just going to be like, oh, we're always going to have different types of special energy. This list is growing, and then it's going to shrink out of nowhere. So
Hmm.
be very fortunate if you use a deck that uses special energy, because not every deck does. But know that next year and the year after, that this is probably going to be the back-breaking category compared to some of the other categories we talked about today.
Yeah. So with the next category, this one can actually be a little quick because we're going to talk about gusting, and we are losing two cards, really one really important card and one situational card, but we're not losing much else with it. So with gusting, we're losing counter catcher and then iron bundle. Iron bundle is kind of moving out of play anyway. It was really good when it first
Mm-hmm.
came out, but we're not really seeing it as much. But the counter catcher was really impactful.
Yes.
But with that, I will say we're not losing a lot of pieces that can replace counter catcher, Devin.
No, I think this is again another category that is gaining or keeping more than it's losing, because counter catcher was very situational. It was a comeback mechanic, and Iron Bundle was already being kind of deck built out of decks anyway. But we're keeping boss's orders, so gust whenever you want. Obviously, supportive return, but gust whenever you want. We're keeping Prime Catcher, which outside of Unfair Stamp, I think Prime Catcher is the second, if not the first, most popular ace spec anyway. And it gives you switching, so it's a gust with switch. We're keeping Pokemon Catcher, which coin flips people have opinions of. And then we're keeping Repel. Repel is a really good switch card for those decks that like to have big basics in the active, where you can just tell them to switch. We're talking about the Mega Kangaskhan's. We're talking about the Mega Absols. Play Repel, have them put something else they don't want the active into the active because it's a basic. So I
Mm-hmm.
think this category, until Boss's Orders gets rotated, this category is going to be perfectly fine, and people are just going to we're going to deal with the rotations of Prime Catcher and those kind of niche cards around it, because Boss's Orders is the staple of this type of card, and until that card leaves, we'll be fine. And I think we're going to see what Boss's Orders is for probably eternity. We just will see it under a different name in probably about a year or two.
And we'll see about that because we thought the same thing about Professor's research, and we're losing that. But again, we got at least another year with boss's orders, so we'll worry about that in the future. The next category cards we want to talk about are stadiums, and of course, we're losing a lot of good stadiums out there, but we're also gaining or keeping stadiums as well. So, Dev, what are the major stadiums that we're losing that honestly kind of impacts how we're building decks?
Yeah, so the stadiums that we are losing are big kind of backbone stadiums. So we're losing the Artisans. We're losing Town Store. We're losing Mesagoza. We're losing Calamitous Snowy Mountain. We're losing Wasteland and losing Pokemon League headquarters. So these are, especially Artisan and Town Store, these are decks and these are cards and decks that are your turn one, turn two staples that help you stabilize your board state. In terms of Snowy Mountain, Wasteland, Pokemon League HQ, those are more of your flowy kind of stadiums where that kind of helps accelerate your strategy. But if you don't have it in play, you're not as worried until it's like really late into the
Mm-hmm.
game. So really, it's Artisan and Town Store right now. Town Store, along with Arvin, really pulls tool support out the window. You're going to have to find other ways to get your tools. And then Artisan, along with Nestball, kind of makes your basic search a little more difficult. But again, there's enough pieces to offset that. So, with that being said, I think we still have a lot of really good stadiums in play. And what we're going to be seeing, we've kind of talked about some of it, is that the stadium count and decks are going to change, and they're going to take a different kind of philosophy for at least the next block or so. Or not block, next set or two or so.
Yeah, so we are missing key stadiums, but we're also keeping some key stadiums. So we're keeping Battle Cage, which is big with Alakazam decks, Monkey Dory decks, Area Zero Underdepth. So if you're playing a Terra deck, you're still good to go there. Festival Ground for Festival Leads, and honestly also special conditions, which we're not seeing much with Perfect Order, but Chaos Rising, there's some special editions that are coming back, so that may be a card to put in your back in your binder just for safekeeping. For your grass decks, we still have Forest Vitality. We have Grand Tree. Granted, it is your ace spec of choice, but being able to evolve really quick, Grand Tree is going to be a great option for you as well. Gravity Mountain to kind of help with those stage 2 matchups. Jamming Tower for those tool cards. Granted, with losing Artisan and Town Store, are we going to see tools in play? Still to be determined. It depends on how players build their decks. Team Rocket's Watchtower is probably going to be the biggest card we're going to see just because the Mega Kang's gone. The Noctowl line, Blood Moon Ursaluna is still around.
Yeah.
It's just colorless Pokemon abilities are so strong. We're probably going to see more decks playing the Watchtower. Mm-hmm. And then a new stadium we're getting with Perfect Order is Luminous City. So it's kind of like Mezagoza, but when you use it, it ends your turn. So maybe turn 1, turn 2, we're fine, but it's an effect that we have to deal with.
No, and it might be a counter stadium. You might just put it in your deck so you can bump the Team Rocket Watchtower so you can play your Noctowls. Or you can bump the Team Rocket Watchtower so you can play your Meowth. It very much might just turn into a counter stadium, not because of what it can do in terms of its actual card, but what it replaces onto the board. So, and that's, I think, what's going to be the biggest thing. I think Rocket Watchtower is going to be a big deal, and I think you have to build your deck a certain way now to win or at least manipulate the stadium race to take advantage of the cards inside your deck.
Exactly. So we'll see how the Stadium and the Stadium War really deals with the Perfect Order. Once we actually get there, there's not enough data to really showcase, like, okay, what with the loss of Artisan, or we're keeping Jamming Tower. We don't know how much it will impact us yet. But again, it's just a different way of building your decks and really being with loss of, like, I think Artisan's the big one. You need to play more Buddy Buddies. You need to play more Pokemon Search that we still are keeping. Mm-hmm. So with that, we're losing Town Store. We talked about tools. Dev, what tools are we losing?
So we're losing all TMs, but we're keeping TM Machine, which is weird, but sure. So that card's kind of like just fodder in your deck now. We're losing Rigid Band for stage 1s. We're losing EXP Share, as we talked about. We're losing booster capsules, both the ancient and the future booster capsules. We're losing Bravery Charm for HP buffs, and we're losing Defiance Band for a little bit of damage modifiers. So there's a lot of different types of tools that we're losing, a lot of very important tools. I would say Defiance Band, Bravery Charm, and Rigid Band probably are the 3 biggest that we're losing. But we're keeping a lot of important tools, and a lot of tools that will still be part of decks going forward. And with that, we're keeping Air Balloon for our retreat cost manipulation. We're still keeping Rescue Board. Believe it or not, somehow Rescue Board is not being played as much as you think it would. But I think it's because Air Balloon's better, because it takes 1 less retreat out of the place. We're still keeping Brave Bangles. We just got it. So those non-rule box still have their damage modifiers. We're keeping Counter Gain. We're losing Counter Catcher, but keeping Counter Gain, which is a little weird, because usually those cards are usually blocked together. We're keeping Maximum Belt, because obviously Ace Specs are not rotating yet. And we're keeping Sparkling Crystal, again, another Ace Spec of choice. So there's going to be a little bit of difference on how we want to use our tools. If you can't really see a trend of tools, it's retreat modification and damage modification is really what the tools are doing now, until we get some more tools going in the next couple sets. So it's going to be a little harder to find your tools because we are losing the easiest ways of getting them, but they can still make a big impact because if you can figure out how to draw them, you're going to have more impact onto the game mid to late game.
Exactly. Yeah, I think tools are one of those category cards where not everyone plays them, but when you do play a couple tools in your deck, it kind of changes the whole strategy of what you're doing. So being able to find them super easily made the deck really work, but now we don't have that option. So we'll see how we build around that. If we do, obviously we have petrol, we have on just a bunch of draw, so if we can just draw into it, we're fine. But that will be probably more of a let's play around with, let's see what we can create, and see if it's even worth playing tools and decks anymore.
Mhm.
So that's something that we can only wait for the future and see how we deal with it. So we just spent a good chunk of this episode talking about what we're losing, potential ways of kind of filling in those voids. But let's talk about what we're keeping, especially with archetypes, because yeah, we're losing some big archetypes, but we're keeping some big archetypes as well. So, Dev, we compiled a list of just Pokemon decks that we think that are not think, but we know are still viable with the perfect order and onward. So, what are some big ones that we want to kind of touch on real quick?
So absolutely. So I think the biggest winner of rotation is Dragon Ball EX. That deck really isn't losing anything. It is gaining the fact that its biggest competitor, Gardevoir, is leaving. It's gaining the fact that its second biggest competitor, Golden Go, is leaving. So we talked about that the biggest gatekeepers were leaving. I think Dragapult now becomes the gatekeeper deck for ideas. And if you can figure out a way to survive Dragapult's pace and Dragapult's aggression with damage counters, I think a deck will work. But again, you have to figure out how you want to survive Dragapult. I think Alakazam becomes a big winner, mostly because of combination of what it gains with Perfect Order, but it doesn't really lose anything either. And Zoroark gained a lot in Ascended Heroes, and it's not really losing. It's not going to lose anything until next year's rotation. And I think Team
Mm-hmm.
Rocket decks gain a lot because it gained a lot with Ascended Heroes. It survives everything in those decks survive rotation. Its main engine doesn't even get touched until next year's rotation. And again, it survives stronger because the gatekeepers are gone. Marnie's Grimmsnarl, same thing. It was gate kept. I think Dragapult Marnie is going to be more of a gatekeeping kind of conversation of does Marnie really get better with Dragapult still being in existence? But it's still good pace enough to really survive. And then I think Mega Lucario is better because Gardevoir is gone. So those are the decks I really think if you don't want to look at Perfect Order in any way, shape, or form, really, you can take these archetypes, pick them up, and then move forward for at least the next 3 to 4 months while you figure out what the rest of the rotation era is giving you.
Exactly. Yeah, those are the big archetypes that we have now that aren't really losing much, and honestly gain more just because of rotation. The one, honestly, the one deck I think we're going to see a lot more play of is Mega Lucario because Gardevoir's leaving. Mega Lucario doesn't need a single addition to their deck. Like, yeah, you can use Mega Zygarde, but if you don't even go that direction, you can take this deck and actually do really well now because you don't have Gardevoir and hit you for weakness anymore. There isn't really a strong psychic deck out there. Yeah, you have Alakazam, but Alakazam wasn't hitting you for weakness anyway because it was doing damage counters and not damage. Plus, it can also just one shot you because of just how strong it is. But I think another deck that we can also add to that list is Absol Box. It
Mm-hmm.
won the Champions League in Fukuoka. It gained an adaptation adding the Tail Mask Ogrepon that it didn't have before. It just made it more well rounded. It can hit into Grass Weakness now. It can hit into the Dexter Dark Weak. If you want to play the Cornerstone, you have that as well. I think the with how rotation served that format, I think Absol Box is also a good deck to kind of play around with as well. We're not touching any of the new archetypes yet because we don't know how they really are going to be over where on with the TPCI regions because Japan and us we kind of think decks differently. But if you want to pick something up right now, practice with it. That way, once rotation hits and you go into a tournament, these are the decks that I think we recommend that you should really kind of play around with. Of course, we love our rogue decks, but we haven't really had a chance to sit down like what rogue decks survive just because those are so niche already. It's going to take us a while to kind of figure out what we want to play rogue deck wise.
No, absolutely. And keep in mind, rotation is happening at the same time we're getting perfect order. So when we start looking into the perfect order archetypes, it's going to be in a very different world than what we were building just as the time we were recording this video. So we're going to be reacting. The world's going to be reacting. It's going to be fun with the perfect order cards being introduced to all this. We gave you 7 archetypes that are already good to go, and I'm sure more are going to come. So if you want to get introduced to rotation at the perfect order piece, you're probably going to be grappling a little longer. But I think, again, if you start at a rotation era at the beginning of it, your decks can live for up to 2 years. So there might be an archetype coming out of perfect order you're going to gravitate toward, and you can compete with that for 2 years and grow and adapt with it for 2 years. So don't undermine that set coming in because we haven't talked about it today.
Exactly. And there, of course, there's a bunch of other decks that we haven't even touched on that doesn't really change with rotation. And I will say, if you have the time, granted, the when we release this episode, we don't have that much left in this format. But if you listen to us early enough, try out the trainer trials. Right now, you can actually have an early glimpse of what rotation is. Granted, without the perfect order cards and a couple other cards, aka Judge, um, that are in there, but you can still play around with something that we have now. That okay, what is the basic idea? And then once rotation hits, you can kind of play around with it even more, and you're already used to what the deck will play. So if you don't want to play Enzork, if you don't want to play Dragapult, but like you want to play, say, Steven's Metagross, that engine stays intact. And you can try that right now in the trainer trials and to see how you feel about that. I did that already. I picked Metagross, and I also found Scizor EX. Scizor is my favorite Pokemon. I tried it out and see if it can work. So you can use the trainer trials as a way to kind of experiment while we get into rotation, and then once rotation hits on live, then you have all the other resources to play around with.
Yeah, absolutely. Just don't listen to what the trainer trials tell you. um,
No, please don't.
don't read the text. Don't read plot. Just play. Just do matches. Because it tells you that what Fighting Gong is a replacement for Squawkabilly EX or something crazy like that. Like that's why we did what we did today, because we know there's resources out there giving misinformation. I don't know intentional or not, but it is definitely not correct. So if you are into trainer trials, just play the matches. Don't read the text. Um, it's just because it's just not organized correctly, and we don't want anyone to really feel like they're being led down the wrong path.
It's a great beginning resource, and what we're actually talking about is in the beginning there's like a learn to play lab type of deal in live now, and they've kind of give suggestions on what you can do to change up cards. Great for beginners. If you're brand new to the game, it is a it's a decent resource. But I would say look at Japan's website, Limitless, the Play Limitless, look at Limitless TCG, and look at the city leagues. And honestly, find some friends, find a local league, and bounce ideas off of them. Those are probably going to be your best resources as we go into rotation because, yeah, the live can do so much for us, but there's players out there that experience rotation year after year, and we're used to it. Gain art, like talk to them, get their knowledge, get their experience on what they do to survive rotation because we know everyone hasn't experienced rotation yet. This you may just got into this game a couple months ago, and this is brand new information. Lean onto those players that have them guide you in the right direction, and also you'll create a community with that as well.
Absolutely. So this is our attempt to help guide you in a direction where it will be less shocking. It's still, I mean, for even for us, rotation is going to be something we are going to be grappling with for a couple weeks because we're still going to try to figure out what engines and what supporter spreads and different things on top of learning new cards. Like what we do week in, week out is we just constantly are researching archetypes. We're trying to build our own archetypes. We're not trying to reinvent deck art ideas. You see a lot of the times, a lot of the deck inspirations we get is because we're online looking to see what other people do. But rotation is going to be the period where we're going to be trying to build our own stuff because again, it's a new fresh set with a card pool that is losing 900 cards. So it's going to be a lot for everybody. So don't feel discouraged when you are struggling with your deck building because rotation has kind of hampered what you're used to. That's the point of it. It's designed to challenge us as deck builders and as players for us to push our horizons and to try new things. Do not be discouraged. Rotation is a challenge that we can all overcome together.
Exactly. I think finding a local league is probably very important when we come to this. Again, bounce ideas off, a place to experiment, but also trying live. Like, honestly, I think live is a really great resource. I think they've done a really good job of giving us easy ways to get these cards right at release versus trying to trade packs for it with online. But yeah, use the resources you have on hand, and hopefully that we all will survive rotation. It's it's one of those things that are always going to happen. So to have fun with that. But Dev, do you have any final last thoughts about rotation as we go into it, and really what to expect and how to like really take full advantage of going into a brand new format?
I will say the next couple weeks, like really up until the first major in-person event, so up until from March 26th to April 10th, the ladder is going to be the Wild Wild West. Definitely have fun with that. Join in the chaos. Build decks you think are going to be fun to play with. Experiment with different supporter lineups. Experiment with how much you can utilize Meowth EX. Then by April 10th, pick an archetype that you really do like, and then move forward from there. This is going to be a very different experience for a lot of newer players. So don't be afraid to just take the L. The testing lab is great, but it can only allow you to experiment so much. Go into the ladder,
Mm-hmm.
see what happens, see what other people are doing, and kind of seeing how you can adapt. Because outside of that, unless, like Dean said, unless you have a local league that's willing to experiment with you, that's going to be your best bet. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun, but we're not going to know a lot of information until April 10th at the earliest.
Yeah, just be open to possibilities. There's, as Dev said, it's going to be the wild, wild west. Like, no one knows what to do. Granted, we have a good baseline from Japan, but we always have our preferences. We always have the ways we want to play decks. Just be open, be creative, and don't be afraid to fail. If it doesn't work, change up the strategy that you're doing. Just have fun with it. That's the point of this game. Have fun. But yeah, with all that, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Road Deck Chronicles. Enjoy your rotation. Have fun with the rotation. We're excited to see what this will bring us and going into the perfect order set and beyond. And with all that being said, have fun playing those new rotated sneaky decks.
Bye, guys.